We're going to keep this intro short because we have a lot of analysis to do with 70 rankings in this video, but you can use these rankings for your draft, use them for trades, just use them to look at how good your fantasy football team is. Starting off tier 1, these are all the guys that need to go within the first 8 picks. I really don't think you can make any adjustments in terms of dropping a player below the tier or moving someone up into this tier. We are going to go with McCaffrey, Tyreek, Lamb, Hall, Bijan, St. Brown, Chase, Jefferson. A sentence with each one of these guys. McCaffrey, elite ceiling, possible injury risk given the age and the workload that you had last year, and he's dealing with a calf strain. Tyreek Hill, he's 30, but the man was on pace to have 2,000 receiving yards in a single season last year before his injury. CeeDee Lamb signs his contract, 100% playing in his prime, and ultimately in a very good offense where there's no other target competition. I may just be a little bit concerned that he really wasn't there for the duration of training camp. Breece Hall is going to be a running back that sees a massive offensive line improvement, quarterback play improvement, boosting the overall Jets offense and his touchdown opportunities, while at the same time, he's another year removed from the torn ACL. I think you could take Breece all the way at 1 if you really, really wanted to. Bijan Robinson at 5. He also gets coaching staff improvement. He gets the quarterback play improvement. So he should have more touchdown opportunities for Bijan as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6. Extremely safe option. The Lions project out to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this season. If you are looking at St. Brown, he averaged 17 points per game in a half PPR format last year, stepping into his prime. Even more exciting in a full PPR league. Jamar Chase, we are going to drop down to 7. Now, actually, I took Jamar Chase at pick 7 in the Flock League this year. So my chips are on the table for Jamar Chase. Please get to training camp. Please start playing. And Bengals, I know you don't have to pay the guy, but tell him something nice. Tell him you are going to pay him. Just freaking play Jamar Chase. It should be a very good offense. We know Chase is an elite receiver. Burrow appears to be healthy. If Chase is on the field, I think you should be very excited. And then Justin Jefferson at 8, I believe is, in most cases, at least with most different quarterbacks, he should be the number 1 overall ranked player in fantasy football. The issue is you have the McCarthy injury. So ultimately, Sam Darnold is the only option here for the Minnesota Vikings this season. So it's brutal quarterback play for Justin Jefferson. What's crazy is in the Flock League, Jefferson actually fell down to pick 10, which I don't think should ever happen. Please take him at least at 8. Now, dropping down to our next tier, these are going to be the guys that you can consider at the end of round 1 or at the very top of the second tier. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these players were top 1 to 2 options at their individual positions this season. We're going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs at 9. If you are looking at Gibbs, this is the new generation Alvin Kamara. He's going to have every single target out of the backfield. The upside that you have is if he gets the goal line work, which we saw at the end of last season. Obviously, Montgomery's still there, which is going to keep Jahmyr Gibbs from being ranked inside the top tier, but he could be the new age Kamara. He could be the new age Aaron Jones, running behind the best offensive line in the NFL. A.J. Brown will be our next player. A.J. Brown, very boring. We know who he is. 2.7 yards per route run for 3 straight seasons. He's in an elite talent in a good offense where you have an improvement with the offensive coordinator. Garrett Wilson at 11. Yes, Wilson was a wide receiver 4 last year, but he played with arguably the worst starting quarterback in the NFL with Zach Wilson, and he has the largest QB improvement going to Aaron Rodgers this season. So obviously, everybody, including myself, is expecting a massive step forward for Garrett Wilson. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley will be our next 2 guys. Very basic here. They are both running backs that you shouldn't expect a ton of usage as receivers, even though they can catch the ball, just because the rushing quarterbacks with Anthony Richardson and Jalen Hurts, more likely than not, aren't going to have a very high check down rate. And at the same time, you're going to have to be worried about those running backs getting vultured because you do have Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson as weapons at the goal line themselves. And then lastly, we are going to have Puka Nacua at 14. If you wanted to move Puka to the top of this tier, if you had zero concerns whatsoever about his knee injury, you can do just that. Now, we actually had great news right before I recorded this that Puka Nacua is for sure at practice on Thursday. He is for sure playing week 1. Obviously, that is phenomenal. I would rather him just be 100% healthy, but at least it's good news that he's here. Now, dropping to this next tier, this is to the point where I have no idea what you would do in round 2 if these are the best players available. I'll tell you what I did when I was in the middle of round 2, but obviously it's going to be very dependent on your league and your league mates. Drake London at 15. I understand this ranking for London seems obnoxious. Feel free to go to the comment section, tell me, Mason, oh my gosh, you're an idiot. How the hell can Drake London be ranked inside the top 15 options this season? I get it because the man has never finished higher than the wide receiver 4. You're drafting somebody that's been a wide receiver 4 as your second best player. But you have the quarterback upgrade. Plus, from London, he was an elite prospect coming out of USC, top 10 NFL draft pick. He has dominated from a market share perspective. And with Desmond Ridder as his quarterback last year, he averaged 2.0 yards per route run. So he's a massive quarterback upgrade. I know 15 seems way too aggressive. All I ask from you is let me know who you think we should put him behind in these rankings. Harrison at 16, I think he is an elite level wide receiver. I mean, if we're looking at wide receiver prospects over the past 5-10 years, he's on par with Justin Jefferson, on par. I don't want to say he's right up there with Jamar Chase, right? I mean, this is a phenomenal wide receiver prospect. We both know that those other rookie wide receivers were massive hits year one, but with Harrison, you're already having to take him at the 1-2 turn. He's already priced in as if he's an elite level option. This is the most expensive rookie wide receiver that we've ever had in fantasy football. I think he's a great talent. I think he should have above average quarterback play with Kyler Murray, so I understand it. But it's definitely a little shaky. Now, I have been team Kyren Williams over Devon Achane all offseason. I was looking at the volume that Kyren had last year going, okay, well, you know what? That volume is going to be a little more sticky than what you have with the efficiency metrics of Achane, where Achane was the most efficient running back in the NFL. But where there's smoke, there's fire. Sean McVay coming out saying, yeah, Blake Corum can spell Kyren Williams. Blake Corum's, we're confident enough for him to have a role that Kyren is going to return punts for us. Obviously, I'm not panicking. Kyren Williams is still ranked in the middle of round 2 for me. But I do just want to put a little bit of pressure on the brakes so we don't go all into Kyren Williams this year. Achane would be viable as well. The issue with Achane is he was only 188 pounds coming into the NFL. We've never seen a running back at this size just absolutely dominate. So if you think he can be a 3-down back, rank him higher than this. I just don't know if that's 100% going to happen. Now, our next player will be someone I took in round 2 in the Flock League, but that was a league where we can start up to 4 wide receivers in a full PPR format. Nico Collins. Nico Collins, 3.3 yards per route run last year, playing with arguably the best I don't say the best, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this season. And if you look at the addition of Stephon Diggs, this really shouldn't impact Nico Collins too negatively, given what we saw in the preseason with the usage of these wide receivers. Tank Dell appears to be the guy that's only going to be playing in 3 wide receiver sets. We saw every type of personnel package you could imagine in the preseason, and every time CJ Stroud was out there, Nico Collins was as well. The route participation numbers going to be through the roof. The efficiency was through the roof last year. He's stepping into his prime. They paid him this offseason. I think you can take Nico Collins. Now, Deebo Samuel, still difficult to rank any of the Niners, given the fact that we don't really know exactly what's going on with Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk was supposed to be at practice. He wasn't at practice. I will say, of course, if Ayuk is a Niner this year, I think Deebo could maybe drop a couple spots from here. But if Ayuk somehow still gets traded, Deebo Samuel immediately jumps up to 15 in these rankings. Chris Olave as our next option. I know nobody likes Olave. If you do look at his efficiency numbers over the past 2 years, however, he's been near the top of the NFL in yards per route run. He's been near the top of the NFL with his market share numbers, indicating that, yeah, he was a great prospect coming out of school. He's a great NFL talent. The issue has been the quarterback play is absolutely garbage with the checkdown princess and Derek Carr. Now, unlike Drake London, unlike Garrett Wilson, where we can say, okay, yeah, their quarterback situation's dramatically improved. Sadly, it's still the same with Chris Olave. Jalen Waddle will be our next guy at 22 if you are looking at Jalen Waddle, a wide receiver that I won a ton of money with 2 years ago. Really rooting for the guy. And I actually think you can see a bump up with his overall touchdown rate this season, which we know that's going to be one of the most volatile metrics from a year-to-year perspective. And then last but not least, we are going to go Davante Adams here at 23. What is crazy is if you're looking at just regular ESPN Yahoo drafts where you have college buddies drafting together, work buddies drafting together, there you see Davante Adams get drafted ahead of Nico Collins, ahead of Deebo Samuel, ahead of Chris Olave, ahead of Jalen Waddle. However, if you're in the high stakes drafts and you see us doing those every single night on the live stream, Davante Adams actually goes behind some of the wide receivers that we are ranking him ahead of. So it's very weird that the high stakes draft community this year hates Devontae Adams. The regular fantasy football players, they're still really in. I'm a little bit in the middle where with Adams, I will say he's declined for 3 straight seasons. It is a very bad offense for the Raiders. So I just wouldn't recommend you taking him maybe in the middle to the beginning of the second round in your draft. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Isaiah Pacheco. Yes, you have Samaje Perine coming over to Kansas City. And a lot of people are saying, oh, Samaje Perine is going to be this year's Jerick McKinnon in this offense. Come on. Samaje Perine could not beat out Jaleel McLaughlin. He could not beat out Audric Estime. I don't know why you should be worried about Samaje Perine of all players. Pacheco's still a fine draft pick. If you're drafting on Underdog, you're going to get him at the 3-4 turn. If you're drafting in your regular league, if you can get him in the 3rd round, I love him there. If you have to take him in the middle of the 2nd, it's a tough price. But at the 2-3 turn, I'm completely fine with it. But of course, if you wanted to get into an extra fantasy football draft this year, I'm still drafting every single night on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy. They're best ball, so there's no time commitment at all during the year. That's why it's the best place to get into an extra fantasy football draft. And it's how I draft hundreds of teams every year. It's how I won 150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And if you go to the link in the description or the comment section, you're actually going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 when you make your Underdog account. All you have to do is use code FLOCK, but also with code FLOCK, you're also going to get my rankings, draft guide, ADP consensus cheat sheet. You will get a Christian McCaffrey special pick of more than less than half a total yard for week 1 that is exclusive for Flock users. And you're going to get a Travis Kelce special pick of more than less than half a total yard for week 1 as well. But moving on to our next 2 players, we're going to go with the elite level quarterbacks here with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. I know some people are worried about Allen with the departure of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. What I would just say is if you're looking at sports books right now, they are projecting out the Bills to be the 5th highest scoring offense in the league. And at the same time, Josh Allen's had 4 straight seasons with over 390 fantasy points. This is why he's still my QB1. Jalen Hurts, a lot of people are very excited about because you have the change with the offensive coordinator. Apparently, there are going to be more plays run per game in this offense, more fantasy points scored. Now, obviously, you have some people on the other side of things saying, oh, no, Jason Kelce, they're no longer going to be able to run the tush push, and they're going to lean on Saquon Barkley at the goal line. That would be very sad, but if you look at all quarterbacks in fantasy football, over the past 2 years, we actually have seen Jalen Hurts demonstrate the highest ceiling. Now, our next guy will be Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta actually goes in round 4 of a lot of drafts. I took him in round 4 of the Flock League. He's actually a round 4 pick in pretty much every single Underdog draft, and for that reason, I am all in. Yes, my tight end 1 is actually my most drafted tight end this year. I think tight ends are phenomenally priced. You look at Laporta, best rookie tight end of all time. You look at Laporta, yes, the touchdown rate may be a little bit unsustainable, but the Lions project out to score the 2nd most touchdowns in the NFL this season. And you have no Josh Reynolds here this year. So I'm really excited about Laporta. Travis Etienne will be our next running back at 28. With Etienne, kind of a boring option. I don't necessarily know if you have an elite level ceiling, but he was a mid running back 1 last year. Not much has changed with this situation. Really, the only thing is this coaching staff has come out and they've said that Tank Bigsby potentially gets a little bit of involvement in the short yardage area. Now, our next guy will be Travis Kelce. Looking at Kelce, you add in year 2 Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, year 1, free agent Hollywood Brown. This is a team that we saw last year, really wanting to lean on the defense and running the football. Travis Kelce is another year older. Sam Laporta scored more points than him last season. So for all those reasons, I am team Sam Laporta over Travis Kelce this year. But clearly the Chiefs are an elite offense. Travis Kelce is arguably the best tight end of all time. So if you wanted to take him ahead of Laporta, I'm not going to fault you. And Josh Jacobs will be our next guy at 30. Jacobs, we planted our flag on this offseason. My quote-unquote hot take is in PPR formats, Josh Jacobs will outscore Derrick Henry. And in most drafts, Josh Jacobs goes a round or 2 after. If you are looking at Jacobs, he gets a massive offensive improvement going from the Raiders to the Packers. A.J. Dillon is now out for the season, so he's really only competing with Marshawn Lloyd. Jacobs should have the 3rd down role. Jacobs is still incredibly young. Yes, Derrick Henry also gets a massive offensive improvement going from Tennessee to Baltimore. But unlike Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry is very old. He's turning 31 in January. And unlike Josh Jacobs, he's declined for 3 straight seasons. And unlike Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry will not catch the ball on 3rd down. So obviously, Derrick Henry's had a much better career. Derrick Henry at his prime was significantly better than Josh Jacobs was. But for this season, in full PPR formats, give me Jacobs over Henry. Now, our next guy will be Brandon Ayuk. It is very difficult to rank Ayuk at this point. if you wanted to go through and if you wanted to be a little more risk adverse, possibly you decide not to draft Brandon Ayuk here. Or, I actually have tried trading for Brandon Ayuk as of late. Zach in the Flock League threw Brandon Ayuk on the trade block. I was like, okay, I'm willing to roll the dice. I'm willing to see if he is a Niner this next season. I offered Terry McLaurin and Austin Eckler. That got rejected. Instead, he wanted Devonta Smith and Tajay Spears, which is kind of crazy because if you look at underdog drafts right now, Smith actually goes ahead of Ayuk in pretty much every single one. Now, Lamar Jackson will be our next player at 33. If you are looking at Lamar, I'm more excited about him in a 4-point passing touchdown format where rushing upside is everything at the quarterback position, but he should be playing with the best receiver he's ever had with a year two, Zay Flowers. Hopefully Mark Andrews being healthy also elevates this offense. Mike Evans, a very boring name to talk about, but ultimately the man just prints 1,000-yard receiving seasons. They add in Jalen McMillan, but that's absolutely no threat whatsoever to the target share that Mike Evans should have in this offense. And while, he's another year older going into year 11 of his NFL career, he literally just posted his best season from a yards per route run perspective over the past 3 years. Now, our next player will be Cooper Kupp at 35. With Kupp, if you are worried about the Puka Nacua injury and you're looking at Kupp being fully healthy, going back to the year that we had 2 years ago, I completely understand you wanting to push Cooper Kupp a little bit higher than this. My thought process is Puka was just the best rookie wide receiver that we've ever seen. Cooper Kupp has, at least last year he had that significant drop off. I'm beginning to get concerned when you have these players in their 30s with consistent lower body injuries. So the ceiling is crazy high on Cooper Kupp, but obviously you do have red flags. Devonta Smith will be our next player at 36. If you are looking at Smith, this is an option that you're betting on the offense with. If you think the Eagles are going to be the same team that they were in the second half of last year, then there's no reason you should ever consider Smith with this pick. If you think the change with the offensive coordinator and potentially a healthier Jalen Hurts is going to elevate this back to an offense that it was 2 seasons ago, I think Smith is an absolute crusher here. Mark Andrews will be our next player. With Andrews, yes, he was injured last season. Yes, Isaiah Likely is probably the best backup tight end in the NFL. But honestly, I'm not sitting here thinking that Likely is really going to take usage away from Mark Andrews. Maybe they run more two tight end personnel packages. But ultimately, I don't think that should impact the Mark Andrews target share, where we have seen him just be at the very top of target share numbers from a tight end's perspective over the past 5 seasons. Now, Trey McBride will be here at 38. With McBride, he's the younger option than Mark Andrews. He was much better than Mark Andrews last season. My hesitation in going all in with him is if you look at the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know how much of McBride's year last year was based off his overall talent profile versus the lack of receiving options in Arizona. I think it was probably a combination of both. And now that you have Harrison in, I would imagine the target share does decline for McBride. Now, Mahomes will be our next guy at 39. With Mahomes, yes, this is a team that wanted to run and rely on the defense last season. That is still going to be a risk that you have this year because it just won them a Super Bowl, right? But there is the outside chance that with the addition of Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, with the ability to stretch NFL defenses this season, that the Chiefs get back to where they were 2 years ago, get back to where they were 3 years ago, get back to possibly where they were in 2018 and let Patrick Mahomes do Patrick Mahomes things. And if that were to happen, we know Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. And then our next 2 backs will be James Cook and Rachaad White. If you are looking at James Cook, he should have less volume than Rachaad White. However, James Cook should be in a better offense in Buffalo. I'm not super concerned about Ray Davis, but he will be a name to be on the lookout for. And then with Rachaad White, the volume will be there. And in a full PPR format, I'm completely fine drafting him. I've taken a lot of Rachaad White in round 6 of underdog drafts in particular. Now, of course, the issue that people have with him, he was an extremely inefficient running back last season. But you can be inefficient with volume if you're just going to have a ridiculous amount of targets out of the backfield. And in a PPR format, you can be viable. Look at Alvin Kamara last year. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to be looking at Dalton Kincaid. If you're using these rankings in a draft or you're comparing these rankings to how your draft went, you'll probably notice across the board, I'm high on these stud tight ends. I consider Kincaid a stud tight end. If you're going to look at the departure of Diggs and Gabe Davis, I think Kincaid should have a ton of those targets. We already mentioned sportsbooks currently projecting the Bills to be the 5th highest scoring offense in the NFL this season. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but it is what it is. We've had an entire video explaining that sportsbooks typically are more accurate than you, more accurate than I am, so I'm going to listen to them. DK Metcalf will be our next player at 43. The conversation around Seattle this year is, with the change in offensive coordinator, all of a sudden we're going to have way more passing volume, more 3 wide receiver sets, a higher tempo, just way more dropbacks for Geno Smith. And if that does come true, obviously DK Metcalf is a lot more exciting than where he's been. But you look over the past 3 seasons, DK Metcalf has been a wide receiver that's a high-end wide receiver 3, very low-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy. He's only had 1 finish inside the top 20 wide receivers from a points per game perspective. Going over to our next guy with DJ Moore. DJ Moore was a lot better than this ranking last year. DJ Moore has a much better quarterback than he did last year. So you want to say, well, Mason, this is a clown ranking in that case. And it very well could be. Not going to lie to you, this could be a clown DJ Moore ranking. But I'm going to look at it and go, okay, well, I know that Keenan Allen's coming over. Keenan Allen historically is an absolute target hog. Maybe he's inefficient with those targets this year given his age, but that's going to negatively impact DJ Moore. And they take Rome Odunze, a wide receiver that was just a top 10 NFL draft pick with a phenomenal prospect profile. So the efficiency should go up for DJ Moore from a per target perspective. The volume should go down. And I hate doing this, and very rarely are you ever going to hear me say this because those points clearly counted for your starting lineup. But if we remove the Thursday night performance for DJ Moore, where he literally had like 80% of Justin Fields' passing volume, the DJ Moore season last year looks very, very different. It's a Thursday night game that just got a little bit wacky. Very rarely am I ever going to bring that up. And no, I don't think you should avoid DJ Moore for that reason, but it is worth at least mentioning. Stephon Diggs will be our next guy at 45 with Stephon Diggs. First half of the year last year, he was on pace for his usual elite season. Second half of the year, changed offensive coordinator. Stephon Diggs fell off a cliff. You kept putting him in your starting lineup, but he kept giving you nothing but the middle finger. It was disgusting. He probably lost your league. A lot of people hate him for that. He goes over to Houston. And yes, you have Nico Collins, who I'm projecting to be the wide receiver 1 in said offense. But I don't know. I think maybe it was just an offensive scheme thing with Diggs last year. Maybe Stephon Diggs still has it. It's not like he's incredibly old here. So I'm fine buying the dip on Diggs this year. Malik Neighbors at 46. Now I stand by in your regular draft. If you're able to get Malik Neighbors in rounds 4, 5, 6, beautiful. Take Malik Neighbors there. Elite wide receiver prospect. No competition in his offense. If you're drafting on Underdog, where Malik Neighbors is going in the second round, where it's a half PPR format and we are trying to chase touchdown upside, where sportsbooks are projecting out the Giants to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL this season, it's very, very difficult for me to get behind taking the most expensive rookie wide receiver that we've seen over the past decade outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. in what should be a horrendous offense where the quarterback has never supported a top option in fantasy. So round 2, I don't like. Rounds 4, 5, 6, I'm in love with. Now, Kenneth Walker will be our next guy at 47. If you're looking at Kenneth Walker, I was concerned with the Zach Charbonnet usage earlier this year. However, the offensive coordinator came out. He flipped up Kenneth Walker. He said, you know what? This is a guy that can run routes out of the backfield. He can catch the ball. We are excited about that. Just giving some validity to maybe Kenneth Walker being the third down back. Now, Joe Mixon will be our next running back at 48. If you are looking at Joe Mixon, good offense in Houston. Better situation than what he was in a year ago. No real running back 2 here. We don't even know if it's Damian Pierce or Cam Akers coming off of his second devastating injury. So it's kind of gross. He's probably a little bit of an inefficient back at this point of his NFL career. Obviously an older option. But at the same time, I don't know. Good offense. Rashee Rice will be our next player at 49. Now, news just dropped with Rashee Rice that you are going to have him playing week 1. The NFL is not going to take any action until the legal process plays out. So it looks like Rashee Rice is safe and in the clear for this season. And with that news being dropped, if you wanted to move Rashee Rice up to the very top of this tier, 100% go for it. Rashee Rice in the Flock League actually got drafted in the 3rd round. Now, with that being said, I recently did an ESPN draft on this live stream looking at regular ADP. What we are going to see is you're going to see Rashee Rice goes in round 6 and 7. So if you're using these rankings, maybe you don't get Rashee Rice in an underdog draft, but you should really get Rashee Rice in a ton of drafts with your just friends and family league. Now, CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson will be our next two guys here. I had Anthony Richardson over CJ Stroud for a small portion of this offseason. Really looking at this, CJ Stroud was just the best rookie quarterback I've ever seen. You add in Stephon Diggs into his offense. While yes, Anthony Richardson has all the upside in the world from a rushing perspective, it is difficult for me to get off of CJ Stroud here. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just an idiot. Maybe I need to be focusing in a little more on the rushing upside, a little bit less on the real NFL talent. But I'm going to pivot and I'm going to go Stroud over A-Rich. Now, our next here, we're going to stick it with the Indianapolis Colts. We're going to go Michael Pittman Jr. at 52. What's also very funny here is if you look at high stakes drafts, Michael Pittman Jr. is drafted as like a wide receiver 3 consistently. However, if you look at a draft on ESPN, if you look at a draft on Yahoo, there you actually see just casual drafters really love Michael Pittman Jr. and he'll go as a high-end wide receiver 2. I'm kind of halfway in the middle. In my high stakes drafts, I found myself taking a ton of Michael Pittman Jr. as a wide receiver 3. You had the Josh Downs injury, which I do think opens up more target volume for Pittman. Anthony Richardson looked very bad in the preseason. Anthony Richardson may not have a ton of passing volume and instead may have a ton of rushing volume. But I don't know. I think Pittman in the middle rounds is a safe pick. Zay Flowers at 53, kind of a similar situation, right? If you are looking at Zay Flowers, this is a wide receiver that is attached to a quarterback we love in fantasy in Lamar Jackson, but a quarterback that's never had just a ridiculous amount of passing volume and has never supported a top wide receiver option in fantasy. Now, of course, I'm going to rank Zay Flowers as if he can be a top 12 option because I do think that Zay Flowers in year 2 will be the best wide receiver that Lamar's ever played with. Tank Dell at 54. I know a lot of high stakes drafters are in on Dell over Stephon Diggs. My thought process here is from what we saw in the preseason, Tank Dell may only be on the field for 3 wide receiver sets. And if we were going to have more routes run, if we were going to have more snaps for Stephon Diggs, I prefer Diggs over Dell because I'm not fully convinced Stephon Diggs is washed, even if he looked very bad in the second half of last year. And while Tank Dell was an incredible rookie last season, he is an extreme outlier based off his size. It makes you wonder if he's maybe at a slightly larger risk of injury. And on top of that, while he had an incredible rookie season, he was 24 years old as a rookie. So it's very different than seeing like a 20, 21-year-old breakout. Now, T. Higgins will be our next guy at 55. With Higgins, exactly what you wanted happen. He just goes, okay, I'll play under the franchise tag. Okay, I will be a Cincinnati Bengal this year. I'm chilling. I'm going to have some of the best quarterback play in the NFL with Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase hasn't shown up. So I've actually drafted a ton of T. Higgins in the middle rounds this year. And I took Terry McLaurin in round 6 of the Flock League. It was a league where we can start 4 wide receivers, and it's a full PPR format. So there, I like McLaurin, especially post Jahan Dotson trade. Yes, they signed Noah Brown, but I think McLaurin may end up being similar to Malik Neighbors this year, where you're looking at wide receivers that are just going to be absolute target hogs, but in very bad offenses. I think Malik Neighbors is probably better than Terry McLaurin. So that's why we're, of course, going to rank Neighbors higher. Now, Alvin Kamara will be our next guy at 57. Kamara is a very polarizing player because if you're playing in a non-PPR format, you have zero interest. From a touchdown perspective, we've already seen this team last year, the year before, in the preseason this year, they're going to get Taysom Hill involved in the red zone, and Taysom Hill will vulture some touchdowns from the running backs. In a full PPR league, Alvin Kamara is a running back that may end up with 60, 70 receptions this season, and all of a sudden is just viable based off of that and that alone. So full PPR format, target Kamara, non-PPR league, avoid him. I don't think I am blowing anybody's mind here. Now, our next guy will be George Pickens at 58. Pickens kind of looks similar to Terry McLaurin. He kind of looks similar to Malik Neighbors. It's going to be a bad offense. He's a young, talented wide receiver, and he's going to get every single target in said bad offense. Amari Cooper will be our next guy at 59. With Amari, I actually think Deshaun may make it where you have a good offensive line. He can be a serviceable quarterback. As long as Deshaun Watson's not as bad as he was over the past 2 years, I think Amari can smash in fantasy. You go back and look at Amari Cooper and Joe Flacco this past year. Amari was elite down the stretch, as crazy as that sounds. Now, of course, Flacco was just given his best Jameis Winston impression, his best Jay Cutler impression. He did not care. He was just slinging the ball over the field. which would be very nice to see for Amari with Deshaun. Deshaun's probably going to try to be a little more conservative than that. Amari has been worse with Deshaun Watson under center than the other quarterbacks in Cleveland over the past 2 years. Our next tight ends will be Kyle Pitts and George Kittle. Yes, you're going to see that there's a large gap in my own rankings between like Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts, George Kittle. With Kittle, if Ayuk were to get dealt, I think he can fly up these rankings. There's just so many targets that are going to be going around to Debo, to Ayuk, to McCaffrey, to maybe Sticky Ricky. So the target share is hard to see. And with Kyle Pitts, we want to keep telling ourselves that he's a top-end talent. We want to keep telling ourselves that all he needs is a quarterback. But I don't know. We will figure out together. I definitely drafted Kyle Pitts last year. I'm definitely a little bit burned from it. So maybe you don't want to listen to my ranking on this. Now, David Montgomery will be our next guy at 62. David Montgomery has one of two passes here, one of three pass. One, Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt and David Montgomery turns into a top 5 running back in fantasy. That could happen, which is why I'm giving him his respect and I am ranking him here. 2, Jahmyr Gibbs stays healthy, but David Montgomery has the red zone role, and Montgomery is a viable low-end running back too in a full PPR format. Or 3, Jahmyr Gibbs stays healthy. David Montgomery still has the first and second down grinder role, but he doesn't get the red zone work, and instead they give that to Gibbs, similar to what we saw with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, similar to what we saw with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. And if that were to occur, I think Montgomery turns into just a premium handcuff running back. No matter what, he's going to have an NFL role. It all comes down to, can he get the high value touches inside the 5-yard line, which he had all of at the beginning of last year, which he had half of at the end of last year. And I'm a little concerned that the running back that they just took a pick 12 overall is going to continue to take more and more of that work. Now, James Conner will be our next guy. If you play in a league where trades are going to be very active, or maybe you went with a 0 RB build. In my league this year, since we can start 4 wide receivers and it's a full PPR format, I went 0 RB and I took James Conner as my first guy because I think he's going to be a must-start guy every single week at the beginning of the season. Now, of course, if you're in a situation where you don't need that production early on, then it probably doesn't do you too good because Trey Benson could very easily come on at the end of the season. So if you need a running back early on, I think James Conner's a great option. Calvin Ridley will be the next guy at 64. Sounds like DeAndre Hopkins will be good to go for week 1. If DeAndre Hopkins is good to go, I think we have to pump the brakes a little bit on Ridley because right now sportsbooks are projecting this to be a borderline bottom 5 offense in the NFL this year. I know a lot of people hate hearing that, but that is the reality. But I'm rooting for Will Levis. I'm hoping it can be a lot better. Jaden Reed will be our next guy at 65. With Reed, good rookie season in a good offense this year. So checks a lot of the boxes that we look for. The issue is you have Watson, you have Wicks, you have Dobbs, you have 2 tight ends that are going to catch the ball. You have Josh Jacobs. So you have so many players in this offense that it may be very reminiscent of what we've seen with the Chiefs offense over the past few years, where Mahomes is elite, but they're spreading the ball out so much to other options where no wide receiver really stands out. Chris Godwin will be our next player at 66. If Godwin gets more utilized in the slot this season, Godwin is a lot more exciting than he was a year ago. If Godwin stays on the outside and they decide to put Jalen McMillan in the slot, then Godwin is going to disappoint in fantasy. Kyler Murray will be our next guy at 67. You have rushing upside and arguably the best wide receiver he's ever had. Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson will be our next 2 players at 68, 69. Both running backs that project out to be in bad offenses this year. Both running backs that had down years last season from an efficiency perspective. I think I may give a slight edge to Jones over Stevenson based off of the receiving work. And then Najee Harris at 70. Sounds like Jalen Warren is going to be good to go week 1. So if Warren is good to go, then that is going to eat into both the floor and ceiling for Najee. But obviously, if Jalen Warren were to miss any time, then Najee Harris is a lot more exciting than this. But I think that's all I have for you. I really hope I was able to help you out with this. And of course, if you enjoyed it, hit that like, subscribe if you play fantasy football. And if you want to get in an extra draft this year, I'm still drafting every single night on Underdog Fantasy. There's no time commitment at all during the year. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every season. It's how I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And if you use code FLOCK, you are going to get a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. My rankings, draft guide, and ADP consensus cheat sheet. Plus, you'll get a Christian McCaffrey special pick of more than less than half a total yard and a Travis Kelce special pick of more than less than half a total yard for week 1. So really hoping I can draft with you in the live stream later tonight and really hope that you have a great day.